Hello and welcome to Surveyor Says, the podcast from the National Society of Professional Surveyors. Each week, we bring you fascinating guests that are involved in the profession of surveying. We cover a lot of ground, including Table Lay Talk with Gary Kent, Point of Order with the NSPS Joint Government Affairs Team, Future Focus, highlighting current and future leaders of the profession, and everything survey-related in between. Thanks for joining us here on the podcast, and hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of Surveyor Says.
Hello, this is your host, Curt Sumner for Surveyors Says. Welcome today. Many of our listeners may be aware of the fact that NSPS took the decision that we should create a way for our members across the country and other listeners as well to get to know who our leadership is, or I guess I should say are, because as you know, we have a representative organization where each of the state societies that choose to participate in our joint membership program have a voting director on our NSPS board. The couple that don't have a NSPS director, they just don't have a vote because they're not part of the program, but they are allowed to have input and that kind of thing. But as is often the time, people know that there's a board and they know that there are people on that board. They don't really have any idea who they are or what they do or why they're interested in doing this. And so we thought it'd be a good idea to start this. And I'm really happy today to have Dick Kleinmann from Wisconsin to join me for several reasons. One is he's fairly new to the job, so he can give you some perspective from that side. The other is it's a bit of a continuation of service to NSPS from the state of Wisconsin. You know, that goes back a long, long way. David Scott from Wisconsin back in 1983 was the person who chaired the very first committee in NSPS when they began to explore the Certified Survey Technician program. And from that, the program grew and grew, and today it's nationwide, and we have a lot of participation and 4 levels, and it's just amazing. But having David be involved in that obviously was a big part of that. And then I also think back to my early days in NSPS, where in the governor's position back then, I met this guy from Wisconsin who was just a really cool guy, and I got to know him and love him as a brother, Harold Charlier. He's just a peach of a guy and very well informed and thoughtful. And I do have to say, though, Dick, one of my very most entertaining times with Harold, I was attending one of the conferences. I guess it was maybe a summer or fall conference, and it was in a part of the state where there was a dog track close by. So one evening we went over to the dog track, and I saw a different Harold that day. He was betting and having a heck of a time, and I mean, not that that should be surprising, but it was just a different side that wasn't showing up in the meetings. So,
right.
So for me, having you, and then of course I didn't mention Lisa as our current past president, and she's brought so much to our organization in terms of thinking out of the box a little bit, and let's do things differently or put more focus on things, and that's been great as well. So I'm really pleased to have you as our first guest because in a way I think it helps that you're not a freshman director, but certainly you haven't been in too long. So thanks, Dick, for joining me today. I appreciate it.
No problem. My pleasure.
So we talk about people coming into service. So how about your path to get here?
Yeah, the NSPS directorship was, somewhat foggy in my mind, I guess. Like I said, the whole thing about, NSPS is out there. I used to sit, at the state level and wasn't too involved, but you always wondered what it was. But then, when Lisa Van Horn got involved, certainly, being from Wisconsin, it brought it into my, radar, and got to learn a lot more about the organization and what, NSPS actually does for the surveyors at the different states and everything. It intrigued me, and I guess, getting to this point in my career where I actually have the luxury of time and ability to start giving back to the profession. And I thought, well, that'd be an interesting thing. I was never interested in the state presidency type thing, but this seemed like something in between. So I kind of, threw my name in the hat, and it worked out well. So as you said, new to the organization, just came on this spring, and the issue with this whole COVID-19 thing is really made it different for you long timers and us new ones. So it's probably leveled the playing field there a little bit. But I so much miss the opportunity to see people in person, and build those relationships, and that's what it's all about, and everybody before I was running for it, considering, they said, yeah, don't be worried, these people, just because they're on a national level, they're the same as you and I. They're in the end, they're surveyors, and you got a lot in common. So that's kind of how it came about.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. And everybody, this isn't going to come across the way I want it to come across, but we're just surveyors. I mean, everybody who's involved in this organization are surveyors, and some at different levels. But we find oftentimes by the time people get to NSPS, they've been through part of their career, at least, or a good part, and sometimes, as you pointed out, through state societies. But all that said, when it gets to the final analysis, we're kind of all the same. I mean, we do different things in surveying. Perhaps we have different jobs. Some are private sector, some are public sector. But you're right about the camaraderie, and I'm eager for you to be able to do that in person with all these folks, because I know you're going to find them to be just unbelievably good people.
Right. Yeah.
So you were talking about, you've gotten to the point in your career where this was possible. Tell us a little bit about that path.
It's always interesting to hear people's, how did they get into surveying stories, and mine was, goes way back to the beginning. My father was of the mind that none of his kids should be sitting around doing, lounging around for the summer, and he found me a job early on in high school, and at that time he was involved in buying and selling real estate, and so he knew surveyors. But the funny part was, at first he knew one of his renters ran a upholstery business, so he found me a job with that guy to stuffing couches, as I call it, and thank God before I ever started, sorry Lee, that he found me another job with a surveyor that did some work for him. And I was like, couches, surveying, what's that? Oh, you get to go outside, oh yeah, I'd rather do that, So here I am 40 years later, still at my summer job, I guess, as I call it, but yeah, it was, what attracted to me was the inside and outside, mixture. And at that age, it's just, hey, it's something intriguing. And how should I say, I was fortunate to start with a small firm. We'll get into this as far as mentorship discussions later, but I think that was a real good thing to be able to actually start out, one-on-one. Crew sizes were, at the big crew was 3, but most of the time it was a 2-person crew. So that's how I got in, worked during the summer. And I actually worked during high school, during the winter. I had late arrival to school because I went to work at the Surveyor in the morning, and then left right after that and worked for the ski hill in the in the winter. So yeah, and then right after that fell into full-time employment. Been there ever since.
So working for the Surveyor, part-time and working at the ski hill part-time. Did that make you begin to look at the land a little differently and say, wonder what this would look like on a map?
Oh yeah, yeah. That was, one of the early things, the mapping. I'll age myself. There was a lot of light table and pencils and tracing and doing stuff like that. But yeah, you begin to get that sense of what land is like. And like I said, my dad was in real estate, and we spent a lot of Saturday afternoons and Sundays driving around looking at land. And he kind of specialized in farmland. So I probably tagged along with him as he walked the land, seeing if it was suitable for his ideas and stuff. So yeah.
So were you fairly quickly be able to say, Dad, I think the line might be over here a little bit?
Yeah, no, never got to that point, I guess. But yeah.
My father was a minister, so I didn't really give him a lot of advice on his job either.
No.
Yeah, that's interesting to have those two different jobs. And you mentioned the small crews. I've said this on the show before, and I've worked on a lot of small crews myself, and particularly when I owned my own business. But even as I was coming along, but my very first job was on a DOT crew that had 13 people on it. So, of course, we broke up into groups sometimes, but
well, right, yeah.
It took me a while to get to the idea of one or two people on a crew.
Yeah. Given the technology, that was a necessity back then.
Oh yeah, it absolutely was. No question about it. That's for sure. So right. That's where you started, and then was that you said that was private sector, right?
Yep. Started out in the private sector, and that's where again it was at most we had 4 people in the whole firm, type thing, focused on boundary surveying. And the one leading partner was also a land developer, so we would do subdivisions and construction staking and stuff like that. But yeah, started out and fairly early on. I don't know how he got connected or whatever, but he had mentioned that the state of Wisconsin had an apprenticeship program in land surveying, and my boss Ron Weiss, put that in front of me and said, hey, would you be interested in this? And we went to actually talk to another local surveyor and his young helper, and said, well, maybe we should do this together or something like that. But ended up, I bought into that idea. College was just not in my family's, purview, I guess, or possibilities. So it really appealed to me as a way to work and learn. And so at that time, the state of Wisconsin, the apprenticeship program was right through the state of Wisconsin, and it was a 6-year program, very structured. They had a whole list of different things that you needed to go through to get an experience, a well-rounded experience in surveying. Had to keep all kinds of records and go through all that, and then also taking classes at the point in time that distance learning back then involved a typewriter and and mail and stamps, sending things back. So I took courses through UW-Madison, the surveying. Fred Tomac was my professor. Great program between that and taking math at the local tech school to strengthen my math skills, and went through that whole process. And I wish I could have gone to college for a lot of things, for polish and report writing and all those kind of things. But I don't think you can replace that on the job learning. And I wish today's world would be a little bit of both.
Yeah, I really agree with that. Our paths are very similar from that perspective. I was curious. You mentioned the apprenticeship program. Was that through the state, and you could do it working for individual surveyors, or did you have to be working for the state?
Nope, that was you could work with any surveyor. So yeah, like we were going, it was a private sector surveyor. It was just a program, run by the Department of Licensing, Regulation and Licensing at that time. And yeah, started out in the private sector, small boundary firm, and then I ended up going on to the big world down to Milwaukee for about 9 months, worked for a consultant engineering firm working there. And that's where I finished up my apprenticeship. We transferred the apprenticeship to them. And about the time I finished up with them, a job became available in West Bend at the city engineering department. So the difference was a 15-minute commute versus an hour. And that was a big factor at the time. So took that, and that started my foray into the public sector. So spent a long career with the city of West Bend, actually 27 years with them, working my way up from engineering technician on the survey crew, doing that work, and then ended up sliding into the city surveyor's position about 1991, I believe, something like that. Because I got my license like the week I started at the city, June 5th of 1985. And so I had my license, and that's a little difference. It's sometimes difficult to get your, boundary experience at a municipality. But West Bend was a 30,000 and population. We did a lot of certified survey maps and stuff like that. But did one plat there, one large one. But yeah, so went through that engineering surveying, took care of all the surveying for acquisition. And it was really nice, in that setting to be able to work with a city attorney. Over those years, I went through probably 3-4 different city attorneys, and I always had a good rapport, and it was really cool to have a law library down the hall, right? To be able to actually go through that and bounce things off of an attorney, that was basically a coworker. And then after that, continue on the career path, basically went to the state of Wisconsin DOT after they kind of outsourced our whole department at the city at that point in time. And so I was looking to stay in the public sector, and went down there, and this is part of expanding your world, type thing. So my world went from a 6-mile radius, type thing to 7 counties, in southeast Wisconsin. And at WisDOT, I managed contracts for survey contracts, hiring consultants to do the surveying for the state of Wisconsin. They're managing contracts and then managing the actual project. So then we'll get into later, I guess we'll wrap that up. And then after a while, then I said enough of the public world after 32 years in the public world. And I was looking for new adventures, and approached Ayers Associates. They were one of my go-to consultants that did work for me. I knew they had a great culture, and ended up going into the aerial mapping world there. So very much related, but I wanted to, expand my horizons. And so now I've been working there now almost 3 years as a project manager, dealing with aerial mapping, and trying to bridge the gap between aerial mapping and surveying, because they're both in our division. The land surveyors and aerial mapping are in the same division. So that's my route and how I got to where I am today.
So from the way that sounds, it almost sounds like, okay, if we were going to create a model for experiences and being exposed to such a broad range of issues for people on our board, that would probably be you, because oftentimes people go one side or the other. You either practice private practice your whole life, or your government your whole life, or whatever. And that's not to say that you still can't understand both sides of any particular situation. But if you've actually been there and you know how that works and how those interactions occur,
Right.
it is really important. And the apprenticeship program is interesting. In my home state of Virginia, there is an apprenticeship program. Unfortunately, it's only really strong in the northern part of the state. But Virginia is one of the states that still doesn't require a 4-year degree. And so this program has been going on, I think I'm right about this, from maybe the late 50s or early 60s, and continues today. And it's connected to the Department of Labor in the state and all those kind of things. And so it does provide for those people who don't have the opportunity or even the desire, for that matter, to go to school to the college level. They still have a path to get there. And you're not going to get physics and all the science that you're going to get, but you certainly get a good idea of what the profession's about and what surveyors do. And it sounds like that's what you had, a similar circumstance.
Yeah, and then you just add years and years of experience, and that's where things are getting. You said understanding other people, and I've gained a much broader understanding of if everybody was just like me, the world would be boring, right? And
Yeah.
and learning there's other points of views, other worlds out there, and that's what I'm all about. Learn those things. The light bulbs go on. As you're more involved in state and national organizations, it quickly becomes apparent that forming a consensus is hard work, and not because people are obstinate or anything, but they come from different backgrounds, different worlds. Different things are important to different people.
Well, you're talking about transitions. I'm not sure there's been a transition bigger than the one in the mapping world over the last 40, 50 years or whatever it's been.
Oh yeah.
Just that must be quite exciting to be involved.
Yes. Yeah, it's when I started, as a surveyor, something about photogrammetry, right? You've done a lot of targeting, stuff like that, and you know about stereo and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, it's been such an explosion like surveying has. I mean, the technology and aerial mapping is now, we routinely do combination flights of aerial LiDAR and photogrammetry at the same time. And it's basically, well, how can you have two flights and still be competitive? It's that the LiDAR is so great that it saves us time on the back end in the processing type thing, and then mining the data for so many more things. It's very interesting, very, very cool data. And like I said, expanding my world. I've been doing projects in Idaho and Montana, Colorado. It was some really interesting topography. Wisconsin's not exactly a flatland state, but our bumps are much smaller than Colorado's.
Yeah, two of my really great friends over time were a couple of guys from England who had come here and eventually started a firm. And we did a lot of work with them when I was at a partner in a firm down in the southwestern part of the state, and then after I came here too, and sort of working with those guys, and even the things we had to do to help them changed over time, of course. But just watching somebody sitting on a stereo plotter and all of that kind of stuff, and then it goes to a whole different situation. And unfortunately for me and their families too, they both are deceased now, and both of them from accidents. One was a boat accident, one was helping a neighbor cut a limb out of his tree, and the ladder fell. But just great people to work with, and I think that's what's so important, whether it's in our jobs like with what you're doing, or whether it's in an organization like NSPS, having those perspectives about listening to what other people have to say. Certainly that's true on the public side, on the lobbying side, so to speak, or even just in general. Not always sure that other people we're talking to have that same attitude about listening to what we have to say, but nonetheless, it's important to do that. So in a background like you've had, you kind of get that. You have you're not been isolated to one thing. So that's really cool. And I think that'll be a big help for you, and it'll definitely be a big help for NSPS moving forward.
Yeah, if you know me, I've always told people is if you ask 3 surveyors for their opinion, you'll get 5 opinions back, right?
That's correct. That's absolutely true. So do you have any, I know you just coming on board, and I don't know if you have any thoughts about the organization in terms of things you've seen, or where you might want to continue to be part of the thing? Or maybe that's too early to ask that question.
No. It's going through our first spring meeting, which ended up being virtual. I sat in. That was a nice thing. You were able to sit in on every committee meeting almost, as we made sure they didn't overlap, I guess. But at first it's like a fire hose, right, coming at you, trying to figure out what's all this going on. But yeah, certainly, the workforce development aspect of trying to get younger surveyors involved and trying to increase that mentorship opportunities. The education, for some reason, coming up my way through into surveying and my background, it just seems like, I'm kind of like that, the demographic, right? That we got to lower the average age of surveyors type thing. And, I've been trying at the state level. We had a case where the United Way program came in, did a presentation at our office, and it was about, workforce development for in the manufacturing world. And they had a really slick program where they really made sure the kids had a great rate of success working through that. And I'm like, the light bulbs are going on. We got to do something like that for surveyors, not just put something in front of them, really support them throughout the thing. And, unfortunately, in a volunteer organization, it's where we all get all excited about, doing this, and then we leave the meeting, and then, now it's sudden dead rules and survey to go out the door. So I'm looking, I think we need to actually spend some money. That would have cost some money to spin up that program. In the end, it didn't happen, but it got the discussion going, at a state level, about doing the scholarships we give out is a good start, but I was looking to do something else, and I'm like, well, let's see what we can do at the national level. And NSPS is doing a lot of good things that actually I was going to just inject into the state program, the CST program, and all these things. Why replicate that, but actually, dovetail them. So that education, obviously things are changing. I've been listening to some of your podcasts, and when you're interviewing guys out in Oregon and talking about remote virtual learning and new ways to deliver that survey, that 4-year degree or 2-year degree. I mean, geography hurts. It's, how many states have a 4-year degree in the state, and yet they require a 4-year degree, right? So if we can work out some kind of hybrid, and while this whole COVID thing is just making that, so apparent that what you can do in that way. So that kind of thing, interested in those two worlds. And other than getting involved in maybe bridging the gap between surveying and, FEMA, USGS, type like that, the aerial mapping folks. Yeah, I've touched on a lot of things. I got to call Amanda and formally sign up for some committees. It's been a busy time. Spring is our crazy time in aerial mapping, so things are finally starting to slow down a little.
Yeah, one thing about, you just mentioned the online or distance learning for getting the education. One of the things I've always liked about that concept is the fact that it sort of works the way things worked out for you, where you're getting education, but at the same time you're getting experience. And I think that's really important for anybody coming into the profession.
Yeah, learning how to apply it as you go.
Right.
Let's face it, a license is a license to learn. You should be still learning, the day after and 10 years after you got your license. So.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've found out through life, is that you always need to learn something more.
Yeah, like right now, I got to learn how to turn on a total station nowadays.
Yeah. Well, I'd be right there with you. I have to admit, if I had to do that today, I'd need some tutoring pretty heavily.
Yeah, great. Yeah. Yeah, now you don't even have to look through it.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. That would be a bit weird. Well, I appreciate you joining me today, and particularly kicking off this NSPS Director series that we're doing. And uh, I think it's a great thing to be able to have this going on and get the different perspectives from people across the country and let our members know. And for me, the big thing is let members know that NSPS is just made up of people just like them.
Right.
And that's the most important thing, I think. And looking at issues the way surveyors look at issues, not people, other folks doing that for us. So I appreciate that, and being our guinea pig, so to speak, as we kick this thing off.
That's all right.
But I do appreciate it, and you got the word. I guess we are doing the fall the way we did the spring. You saw that,
Right. Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
That just had to happen, with Tulsa's a hot spot right now, so we
Yeah. Right.
wouldn't want to go there. So hopefully we'll get back together in the spring. But I agree with you. I really like the idea of being able to sit in on all the committees. That helps us on staff to be able to do that.
Right. Yep. Yep.
So,
Yeah.
well, thanks again. I hope you have a great weekend, and we'll be talking again sometime soon.
Great. Thanks, Curt. Very much appreciate it. Looking forward to chipping in.
And we're looking forward to having your input. So thanks so much.
All right.
Have a great
Take
week.
care.
See you later.
You've been listening to the Surveyor Says podcast, brought to you by the National Society of Professional Surveyors. If you have any questions about today's episode or any other topic, please email us at info@nsps.us.com, and we are here to help. Visit our website, nsps.us.com, to learn more about our association, the programs we administer and support, our sustaining members, and information about future episodes of Surveyor Says. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Spotify, as well as our podcast host, Podbean. And remember, it's a great day to be a surveyor.